I want to begin with a quick story, a true story, about a little elementary school kid named Tommy. Tommy's mom and dad, when he was in elementary school, told him, Tommy, when you get to junior high school, it's going to be really different. When Tommy got to junior high school, he looked around and observed it really wasn't all that different than elementary school. And when he was in junior high school, his name had changed over now to Tom, and his mom and dad said, Tom, when you get to high school, it's going to be really different than junior high school. Tom went on to high school, and in his observation, really wasn't all that different than his experience at junior high school. He's going through the high school experience, and comes a time when mom and dad talk to Tom and say, hey man, when you get to college, it's going to be really different. Now, he'd heard that story 3 times before from mom and dad. And the thing that was different this time is that when he got to college, he looked around and observed that it was indeed really different than the high school experience. Tom went on with his education, got a graduate degree, and he happened to go into college education. In looking around the room, Tom happens to be a member of the audience. I'm telling this story with his permission. However, if this is a successful event, and we hope it is, I asked Tom if he would reveal his identity at the end of the day to the audience, and he agreed. If it is not as successful as we all hope it will be, Tom will be remaining anonymous to the people in the room. So, with that said, I'd like to begin the first panel here in a moment. Before each panel, we will have a brief video roll-in from a nationally known expert, nationally known person in a specific area that is sort of just is a psychologist, Ausable might say it's an advanced organizer. It gives our brains sort of around the topic. So our first video roll-in is Dr. Stephen Spangell. And Dr. Spangell is very, very active in the area of higher education. For 20 years, he served as director at the Higher Learning Commission in downtown Chicago. And if you didn't know of the Higher Learning Commission, it is part of the reason that your college stays accredited and that your transcripts will, in fact, for your students, transfer to other institutions. They ensure that that process works, and it works with integrity. He left the Higher Learning Commission and is now director of education projects with Plexus International, based in Minneapolis. His office is here in Chicago. So with that in mind, we'll begin with the initial video roll-in, and then I'll introduce members of our panel, and we will go from there. So I'll ask our expert video folks to roll it, and we'll begin. Dr. Stephen Spangell.
Well, the biggest issue in student success in college, for most colleges, is that many students come in without the level of preparation in certain basic subjects that the colleges would like to see. Math is one area, English is another, and in order to get them up to college-level courses, they find they have to put in remedial or developmental work that the students rebel against because they got good grades in high school and they think they should be well prepared. So the difference between what colleges expect and what students think they're prepared to do is a major issue. Math is a difficult subject for a lot of people. I mean, it's very abstract. You're dealing with concepts that are once, twice removed from reality, number and ratios between numbers that don't seem to be easy to touch. And then there's a very complex encryption system in which things stand for other things, and you have to learn all the codes, all the symbols and signs. And a lot of students just find abstraction and encryption difficult. And I don't think that institutions always level with them about how difficult they're going to find it and how much they need to stick in there and persist. Many institutions have made it much too easy for students to withdraw from courses, to shop around and retake the course with a different instructor, rather than to sit down and grapple with the subject matter. It seems to me it would do a service to students to level with them and say, look, you're going to have difficulty at times when you take this course. You're going to find it a struggle to understand the concepts. When that happens, here are some strategies that may help you carry through, because I don't think a lot of students come to college with the experience of struggling with obstacles and overcoming them. Well, I think there are lots of institutions that have had small successes with particular pieces of the problem. In mathematics, there invariably is somebody who can teach a particular concept well, and if that information and know-how were shared with colleagues, would be able to raise the level of the math program overall in the institution. One of the things I got the opportunity to do when I worked in accreditation was to see hundreds of different colleges and see all the innovative things that were going on in those colleges or within departments in those colleges, but to be kind of astounded at how little communication there was between institutions or even between faculty in a single institution. So if colleges could put what they know collectively to work collectively, they could do a lot better job. But as long as they leave the secret for how to teach fractions with one person and the secret for how to teach sines and cosines with another person and never share that, there's not much progress. Yeah, the stuff in the paper yesterday said that the Common Core focused exams that were given in Illinois showed that in high school, 17% of Illinois students are where they should be at grade level in mathematics, which means that over 80% are below grade level. And Illinois is probably braver than most states in giving a hard test aligned with the Common Core. So we have an accurate read maybe on how deep and broad the problem is. But it's pretty much the same problem everywhere. Every college I dealt with across 19 states was bringing in students who were ill-prepared in math, putting them in math remedial and developmental math courses by the hundreds. In this day and age, when many of the careers students are attracted to are in the sciences or in medical sciences and require mathematics, having large proportions of our entering students unable to take college-level math handicaps them seriously for the choice of careers that are attractive. And it's more of a problem now than it was 50 years ago when there were more career choices that didn't require that kind of advanced skill.
Very good. That was Dr. Stephen Spangell. There is an additional 15 minutes of that interview that is available on the college website, for the conference website, and that will be made available after the conference so that you can hear a lot more about what Dr. Spangel had to say about the issue. I should mention as well that there are notepads in everyone's folder so that you can certainly take notes on the panelists and the things that you hear, as well as, again, I encourage you to ask questions. I want to begin with first introducing the panel, and then asking them for just an opening set of thoughts from their own perspective before we go into any formal questioning. So to my immediate left is Dennis Barcima, who is a successful CEO in technology space. He has donated his time in developing the social entrepreneurship program at Northern Illinois University, and he is a COD alumnus. To his left is Dr. Robert Capetta, who you met earlier, who introduced Sheila Simon to us. He is professor of mathematics at the college, very active statewide in mathematics standards and articulation initiatives, and travels widely around the state in assisting that entire process. To his left, and in the middle of the panel, is Dr. Tom Carter. Tom is professor of physics at the College of DuPage with a wide background of experience from Fermilab and in the telecommunications industry and other areas of engineering prior to his arrival at College of DuPage. To his left is Dr. Keith Knabb. Keith is professor of mathematics at Moraine Valley Community College, and certainly a very active researcher in the area of mathematics education and various methods of mathematics education. And to his left, and last but not least on the panel, is Dr. Linda Sons. She is a multi-award-winning emeritus professor of mathematics from Northern Illinois University, author of a mathematics textbook, now I believe in its fifth edition. So panel, welcome to this first event. And I'd like, maybe just for a brief weigh-in of just sharing with us what comes to mind to you related to this issue of transitioning. And rather than necessarily going from right to left, I'm going to start in the middle of the panel with Tom Carter.
So the question is, what skills or what would we like to see to help the students transition? And I think, I guess we were just talking over the table, I think we're all going to say very much the same thing, and the same thing that Dr. Spengel said in the interview. But I would also like to start out by saying I go to a lot of local professional conferences. Any Physics West people here? Physics West, okay. Physics West, or the American, the Chicago section of the American Society for Physics Teachers, and locally, most of the people there that show up at these meetings are high school teachers. Probably about 2/3 or 3/4 of people are high school teachers, and I'm just constantly humbled and embarrassed by the comparison of the I don't want to say restrictions, but yeah, maybe restrictions is just a good word. That they have a whole, vocabulary of 3-letter acronyms that they have to use and forms they have to fill out before they can even deal with the, almost with the education of their students. So I would feel embarrassed if I stood up here and said, oh, it's really simple. I can tell you what the high school physics teachers need to teach their students because it's obvious to me. I'm sure next time I showed up one of these meetings, about 4 people would drag me over in a corner and say, oh, that's great, Tom. You knew what I needed to teach. Well, why don't you just get in line behind my principal, the state, and the 4 parents I talked to last week, because they all also knew what I needed to teach my students. And so I'll be sure and put what you were sure we needed on that list also. So I think we should all take whatever Tom Carter says about what needs to be done in the high schools with a grain of salt. By the way, I should also point out my vice president and my associate dean are also here, and I have a very, very small lab budget. It's tiny. It's unbelievably small. But I will say one of the things I'm also embarrassed about at the meetings is, I have a lab budget, right? And then there's always these little times where people stand up and say, you know, cool things they figured out over the month so they can show you. And whenever I grouse about how small my lab budget is, the high school teachers all stand up and say, hey, look what I bought for 50 cents at Office Max, and look at the 6 cool demos you can do with it, right? So again, it's sort of tough to to grouse about my lab budget at those meetings. So. But my budget is very small. I want to point that out to my associates.
Thank you. Let's move to Dennis Barcima here.
Oh. Well, thank you all for being here. I would echo Tom's words. I do mentoring in Palatine High School, and for all of the high school teachers that are in here today, I don't know how you do it. It is I teach 2 to 3 classes at NIU depending on the semester, and I'm exhausted, and I don't have enough time in my day to do it. And then I see high school teachers, I teach 8 classes a day, every day. And I'm like, wow. But it's a tough economic state right now. This is not a great state to be in right now from a higher education standpoint and from an education standpoint, period. We're having a tough time trying to hang on to our students who graduate from high schools here in the state of Illinois. It's very competitive to get them to stay in state. And then one of the biggest issues we have in higher education is that once we get them there, we need to keep them there. There's a tremendous dropout rate between freshman and sophomore, junior. So lots of emphasis and lots of focus being given on what can we do from a higher ed standpoint to not only recruit students and keep them in state, but once we get them, what do we do to keep them in school? So, to me, those are some of the big issues that we all face.
Thank you. Let's move to Linda Sons.
Well, I'm musing about how all this conversation has been going. And one of the things that strikes me is that when I went to college, and I went from living on a farm and being top of my high school class, being very sure that I probably couldn't compete because everybody else who was going there would be the tops of their high school classes, so the whole idea of transition was a little frightening, right? I lived 200 miles from the university I was going to. My parents weren't thrilled with my going there, so it was a major thing. But I wanted to learn, and I felt that it was an expression of my talent that I should learn. I should go on and do things, right? And I went on with the idea, well, now, in May of my senior year in high school, thanks to the group of people who were in the guidance counseling and the principal of the school, I got handed these scholarships, which ensured me that I'd be able to, because one of them also gave me a job, be able to survive my first year of college. So I was willing to run the risk. I think there are a number of young people out there who are looking to run the risk to get an education if we gave them the chance to even think about it that way. Our culture, unfortunately, I think, pushes everybody with the idea that you go to college to get a job, you go for the notion that you're going to have this career, and students ought to come in with knowing what a career is already and what they're going to do, rather than go on and find out who you really are. I mean, many studies have shown that people's brains are continuing to develop until they're age 26 or so, right? Sure, they're bored in high school, in quotes, they say, right? But when you start talking on them one-on-one, you discover life is different. When you start talking about them individually as to who they might be as people, and what do you really like, where are your real talents, higher education should help them develop those capacities to be who they are, truly. Then they can contribute the most to our society, our culture, rather than us trying to channel them in some particular direction, to help them grapple, to help them run the risks of going and maybe being something far better than what other people might think they would be. Right? I'll stop at that for this.
Thank you, Linda. Let's move to Keith Knabb.
Hi. I figured out your mathematical pattern for how you were selecting us, so I was thinking about that. So my basic thing is a little bit different teaching mathematics. I see the problem as largely a lack of student engagement, and I think that is partially the fault of instructors of mathematics. If you go back and you think about your experience of sitting in a math class, you probably recall being bored sick and just not being all that interested in the content. So I feel like we need to kind of rethink instruction, rethink the ways that we teach mathematics. Some of the things that we heard, I don't really know if requiring another year of mathematics is the answer, because I feel like we need to have a qualitatively different kind of mathematics that we teach. And that way, students don't have to be required to take more math. They'll actually want to engage in more mathematics. This is something directly, I've had this experience where when I have done things like flipped instruction, done things very differently in the class, I notice my drop rate goes way down and the success level increases tremendously. But if we're just lecturing to students and if we send the message that they should come to class and be very quiet and take really good notes, then they pick up on that right away and they're just disengaged. And then they're not going to really want to do much more in mathematics.
Thank you. And let's go to Bob Capetta, please.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for coming today because I think events like this are part of the solution. The only way we're going to make a difference is if we collaborate. And the reality is many folks in the sciences do not want to miss class. Class time is sacrosanct. When that hour is gone, it is gone forever. And I don't believe anyone can teach my class as well as I can. So I'm not very thrilled to have someone substitute for me. So I think that's a real problem we have. You know, I've been a leader in our statewide organization, and we try to do most of our events on Saturdays because mathematics people just don't like to miss class. So if I was going to say that the three keys that we need to improve things going forward, we need to make a commitment to collaboration. And that means all institutions need to find the resources to enable their faculty across the board to engage in professional development. We live in a time now where the state has no money, and the reality is many institutions have no money. And oftentimes professional development is the first thing that's cut. I think that's a bad decision, you know, because we're going to pay for that price in the future. We need to make sure that people can work together and collaborate so we can share best practices. Sheila's document is fabulous. Get a chance to read that. But the reality is, I'm betting that the senior administration in the state of Illinois have all read that document, but I'm guessing relatively few faculty have. We need to get together to share this sort of information. Collaboration is key. A second key is innovation. You know, I'm sitting up here with three generations of mathematics professors. Linda Sun's one of my dearest friends in this profession. I had the privilege of sitting in several of her classes. Never was once bored, I am happy to say. Keith is the future of our business. He's going to do great things. He and I do research in similar areas, and I'm very proud to be working with him. But both of those folks have not been afraid to innovate. They've been willing to take chances in how they organize their courses, how they organize their curriculum. I'm sure that the finished product is always wonderful, but as you go, sometimes you make some mistakes. Sometimes you have to change some things. That's okay. That's what the process is. To be an effective instructor, you must be a reflective instructor. Take chances, innovate, learn, and then share what you learn. Tell people what doesn't work. Just yesterday, I was in a meeting with my friends from Parkland College, and they were trying to offer developmental math on 8-week cycles. It was a complete disaster. That's good to know, so that other schools will not make that same mistake. So innovate, don't be afraid to fail. We can all learn from each other. And thirdly, always keep the students paramount. Recognize what we're here for. We're here to do what's best for the students. We're here to design a curriculum that will enable us to help meet their needs. We have a moral responsibility to do the best job we can to help our students. That does not mean a watered-down curriculum. That does not mean lowering our standards. That means doing the best we can to help them get to where they need to be. And I think if we do those three things, we have a chance to make a difference.
Thank you very much. The panelists have each shared part of their own mind share and thought work in in exploring the issue and the processes. As you have questions to any of them, certainly feel free to write those down. Just raise your hands, and they'll then be delivered to Lauren at the center table. I want to begin first with a question that any of you can jump in on. But let's focus first, perhaps, on students and their challenges, and then on maybe some potential other solutions that you've begun to illuminate. So, from the higher ed perspective, in all of the areas that you interface with students, what are the most significant challenges that you see students facing as they enter college as green beans out of either high school into community college or high school into four-year college, or in the case of Linda at Northern and Dennis, coming from a community college for the first 2 years and then being a green bean at a four-year school? What are the significant challenges that you observe in the students?
I'll start. First, obviously, there's always a financial difficulty. All students face that one way or another, whether you talk with them as freshmen or you talk with them as transfers. It's how am I going to make this? And that makes change in some of the decisions that they would have. How much do they have to work or some such thing in order to make up for what the finances might be? But I think of entering freshmen, there is a lot of taking responsibility for oneself at a level that has not been true for many of them in their lives before. This is no small thing. I mean, I was faculty advisor to a student group all my years of academia, and I can remember standing in the corridors of my church, new student coming in, she's crying. Why is she crying? All those kids in that room, they must have already been here a long time, you know. I can't go in the door, you know. She wanted to be there, but she couldn't go in the door. She needed that support of somebody to go in, get a student out of there, come in, meet her one-on-one, you know. The level of fright that students have is far more than I think we give them credit for being. Yeah, we're in charge. I know what I'm doing, right? But they don't, right? In reality, you see a student on campus, you say, are you lost? They look at you and say, yeah, where's such and such, you know? Even opening day, Davis Hall versus DuSable Hall. My thing said a D, and I ended up in the wrong place. But, you know, it's my first class, and I'm going to miss it. I'm going to be late. I got to run to the other side. There are little things like that where we just sort of assume that they're going to be able to handle those, and it's not a problem. And you know, a friendly, good look around the place, which we tried to foster at Northern and in the department, I might say. But nevertheless, there is this fear of coming into a new setting, taking responsibilities for themselves, even though they've been home, you know, everything has been pretty much independent, but not truly, because folks are always there if, right? And now one of the things that I think needs to happen is young people need to be weaned away from their cell phones. They need to be able to take 50 minutes away from their cell phone. They go to a class, they ought to be able to be without it engaged. I'm not saying because of things that you know have happened that they might not have it on vibrate if there was an emergency or some such thing, but to be able to spend that little time without it, right? It doesn't have to be Linus's blanket, you know, there's a need of it. So, they have to have a capacity to adjust. And I think in this sense, we need to say more to parents about their children, to try to give them the chance to become a little bit more independent in a good sense, right? Like that. When I was in graduate school, one of the gals down the corridor had lived in New York City. We weren't from New York City, so we weren't, you know, who we really should be, right? She knew everything because she was from New York City, and then it came time to do her laundry.
If I could follow up on the distraction issue.
Go.
if you're will allow me. The cell phone issue is big, but I think about my own experience. I'm a working class kid. My parents never went to college. If I lived in a world where I could have a device in my pocket where I could watch any movie at any time that I wanted, I can't imagine how I could have focused. And if you think about what's changed in the last 10 years, I think the overwhelming opportunities that students have for distraction are so much more than they have been. So yes, put the phone away. I agree with Dr. Sons on that one. But even when the phone is away, I think the students are always wondering what's on it. You know, so to have someone fully engaged in what's going on, to me is a very difficult thing.
Yeah, and I can just add, I think a lot of students just lack basic skills, things that we might assume that they should know how to do. I could tell you Monday I received an email, and the entire body of the email was in the subject line. So what I had to do, I actually couldn't read the whole email, so I had to do a copy and paste so I could read what the student said. But I think the thing about it is, because we often hear faculty saying, I can't believe students don't know X or they don't know Y. I think we just have to embrace the fact that they don't know certain things, and then we have to help them with these things. So I did reply to the student and said, by the way, you might want to write it in the body of the email. That would help.
Let me note one more thing in that connection. Students in math particularly, people are not going to remember everything they had in the previous course. It's a prerequisite course, right? Do they know everything from that course? Did they get 100% on everything from that course? And now here they are in your course. So now, how are students going to deal with the fact that there are some things that you're sort of assuming they know because it was in that prerequisite course, but they really don't know? I've had students come to me and they say, we never studied that in section so-and-so of whatever the previous course was, you know. And I look at them and I say, okay, so no one learns 100% of what they're supposed to have in the previous course. Maybe you didn't see it come, but it doesn't mean that you're not able to do something with it. So there's one of two things you can do. You can cry a lot, or you can pull up your socks and go learn it now, right? And I think that's something that we need to do with students, is encourage them to go ahead and do the things that they really ought to do, right? And not put them down for it, just this is part of life, right? It's to move on that way.
Thank you. My name is Russ, and I haven't been to your institution before. This is my very, very first day on campus, and I'm knocking at the door of 5 professors. And as I come to each of the 5 professors' doors, I ask you a question, and that's this. I haven't done any of this before. Can you give me 2 or 3 secrets to success? 2 or 3 nuggets of stuff that I'm not going to learn in a textbook on how I just navigate this place called college? What are the secrets to success?
Go to class.
Go to class.
A lot of students think it's not necessary. So first off, go to class. Number 2, do the required reading, do the assignments, do the homework, stay engaged with what's expected for you to do outside of class. That's the second thing I would say to any student who's starting. And the third thing I will tell them is there will be times when you will feel challenged. There will be times that you feel lost. There will be times that you feel you're never going to make it. I was there. I am an indication that a person can overcome those difficulties. But when you are in those challenging times, seek some help. Don't just try to deal with it on your own. That help can be talking to your classmates in a collaborative fashion. It can be reaching out to faculty or other support services. You're not alone. When you hit those challenging times, find ways to overcome them.
I would also add, believe what your professors tell you. When they give you these syllabi, and on the syllabi these are requirements, these are things in terms that I expect in a certain time frame, expect them to really do that. Don't think that at the end of the semester there's going to be some way to accommodate the fact that you haven't done this assignment or that assignment, or haven't been in class these 12 days. There's your responsibility So take it now, expect it now, right?
Yeah, just to echo what Bob said, I think the most important component is telling them, come to me for help. And a lot of students view office hours as bothering the instructor. So I actually have repitched it and I say, please come bother me. I enjoy being bothered. And that way they do come.
I think the thing too that I see students that when they first get to a campus is that, if they were in their top 10% in high school, you say, okay, great. Now, it just gets tougher because, you were top 10% in your high school, but now we've got how many thousands of high schools in the country. So you're one of hundreds of thousands of students who were in the top 10%. So the competition gets a lot tougher, and I see them having a hard time trying to handle the competition. Classes used to be easy for them. They used to be the smartest one in the class, et cetera. And now they're no longer that, right? So they feel burdened by that. And I just tell students that, you want to surround yourself with those folks. Because they will make you better, right? And so, when you look at some of the things that I tell students, sit in the front row. It can be as simple as just sit close to the front, especially in a large campus like ours when you're a freshman, sophomore, and you're sitting in a 400-person lecture hall, which they are for a lot of their classes in the first few years. If you sit in the back row, you are not going to be seen. You're not going to be engaged. So when you're in these large lecture halls, sit up front. And in the small classroom sizes as mine, I say the same thing. I get a chance to talk to most of the freshmen at NIU, and I tell them, I say, we have a responsibility to make you a better person 4 or 5 years from now, when you leave, but you have a responsibility to make us a better campus 4 or 5 years when you leave. And the way you do that is be involved. Don't just go into class is great, and yeah, we tell them all, get to class, take good notes, et cetera, but be involved. Get involved in student organizations, be a leader, run for leadership office. They have to be involved. They just can't go to class and go back to their dorm room or go back to their apartment. If they don't get involved in what the university has to offer, because this is a very unique time. They're never going to have this experience again, where they have the time and the freedom from a time standpoint to participate in things like this, because in a very few short years they're going to be out of school, they're going to have a mortgage, they're going to have a family, they're going to have all these burdens that they don't have today. So while you are somewhat unburdened, be a part of what every campus has to offer. So get engaged.
I'd like to thank our panelists, Dennis Barcima, also Robert Capetta, Tom Carter, Keith Knabb, and Linda Sons for sharing some of their expertise with us. Thank you very much.